Hey guys, so there was another campfire chat today for Diablo 4 talking about patch 1.1.1, and it was pretty much just going into detail of their last campfire chat about what's going to happen. So it was Joe Pipora, Adam Jackson, Joe Shelley, and Adam Fletcher discussing in detail the patch. And before I talk about any of this stuff, I just want to make it very clear that it's not final. They were very adamant on saying like it's not final. Some things can be changed, some percentages can be changed, and some concepts can be changed, but it's not final. So just take it all with a grain of salt. So the major part of this whole patch is to help balance barbs and sorks. The big thing for sorks that they're trying to change is more survivability towards the end game. Um, they're focusing mostly on less punishing conditional or like mechanical or not mechanical mechanic um, skills. So like chain lightning damage per bounce. How it used to work is if you use chain lightning and it bounced off your character, it would bounce like more times or it would do more damage. But now they're just changing it and they're getting rid of that whole conditional effect and just saying it's going to bounce and do more damage off of anything it hits, not just your character. So a lot of effects like that are just going to be like removed, I assume. For barbarians, what they're mostly focusing on is fury gain. They increase the fury that you gain from your basic attacks. Most of them for like from 11 to 13 or 10 to 13 per hit, which is pretty big for the early game. With for druids and barbs, they really lack. Druids also got a buff in their spirit gain. Um, Druids also got a huge buff in their companions. They're trying to make companions a little bit more viable. Um, some more changes to unique items, basically across the board, but they're trying to bring uniques more in line to the fact that critical strike damage is such a strong proponent to how damage is being dealt in the game. So they're adding like a little bit more crit strike damage here and a little bit more there until they can finally rework it, which is something they plan on doing in the future. Necros, basically everybody got a little bit buffed this patch. Necros are getting a little bit buffed, mostly to their like resource generating stats and stuff like that. They're also changing how a few of the skills work. A part of this patch, a part of what they talked about for this patch is how the fantasy of the characters and how they want to try and keep each character class inside the fantasy of that class. What Adam Jackson talked about a lot was how like there's a specific reason why necro minions get worked on because it's part of the necro fantasy that you bring things to life like skeletons and they're strong and they're useful. And part of the druid fantasy is you play like as a wolf or you play as a bear. So they kind of put more emphasis on the fact that minions are stronger like for necros because it's more of their fantasy than it is for druid minions being buffed. If minions were just buffed across the board for every class, then every class would want to do minions, and it would kind of ruin the fantasy. Some more things they talked about. Let's see. Dungeon bosses are guaranteed legendaries at 35, and they have more health. Which, the more health part, yeah, that's totally understandable. Bosses they take like 10 seconds to kill at like level 70 onward. They're very easy. They're not even strong as like basic elites. But the guaranteed legendary drops, I don't know, man. Like at the end of a nightmare dungeon, you get like 5 items. You get like 4 or 5 items now with this new legendary drop. And I already have like a full stash by the time I even get to the boss. So I'm just like dropping items on the ground. They're leaking out of my bag here. I can't hold on to all of them. So it's getting kind of crazy with how many items they're giving us just in a normal dungeon, in a normal nightmare dungeon run. Um, They buffed a few ancients to make them a little bit more attractive. Yeah, I talked about that. I saw a like there was this one ancient that they showed at the beginning. It was for a two-hander for the barbarian class, but they didn't really change the aspect of it. They just changed like percentages on the weapon. They changed controlled to damage to controlled enemies, crowd controlled enemies, and they changed it to critical strike damage. So that's what I was talking about earlier when I was saying, like, they're just adding more critical strike damage to the game because it's so strong. They're increasing the mob density by 40%. They showed a graphic of it, and it was a bunch of red dots like all over the mini map. And yeah, it does look like they're adding a lot more. So great for them to do that. It's definitely kind of boring running through a dungeon and just like not seeing a lot of stuff, or like hitting packs of like 4 or 5 monsters standing in a circle. Treasure goblins have a guaranteed legendary drop at level 15. I guess people were complaining that killing a treasure goblin didn't really make sense because there was no treasure in it. Um, so they're just adding a guaranteed legendary drop starting at level 15. They reduced the respect cost by 40%, and they're adding an extra stash tab. And they're also increasing the elixir stacks to 99, I believe they mentioned. This was all stuff that they told us last week, but they just like reiterated it again this week. They changed the TP to 5 seconds in the last patch, and apparently they got a lot of backlash from it because now they're going back to 3 seconds. So Joe Shelley went over the reasoning why they did this, and it's because they were trying to stop people from like teleporting out of really bad situations, like where they're fighting something, and like there's a chance that they could die, so they're just gonna teleport out real quick. But ultimately, what it affected was every single player in the game, and not just a few people who are trying to teleport out of bad situations. And they also spoke about how in order for the teleport to be broken, this is something I didn't know. In order for the teleport to be broken, you have to take like a percentage amount of damage before it breaks, which is like 5% they mentioned. So I guess that's why sometimes you'll be channeling your teleport and something will hit you and it won't break the teleport. So you'll just keep channeling it, which is pretty cool. I did not know that about the game. Um, so they're changing that back to 3 seconds. They're removing Cold Enchanted, the Mana Burn, and the Backstabber mods from Nightmare Dungeon maps. That's like a godsend that they're getting rid of the Mana Burn. That is the worst mod to have in a map. I try to always get rid of it as soon as I see it because you just can't use your skills. It's a mod that says, nope, you're not allowed to use skills because you're never going to have any mana or any spirit or any fury or any essence to use it. So they're getting rid of that for now. They're probably going to add it later, but they're getting rid of it for now. And they're getting rid of Cold Enchanted, which basically just stunned, like it CC'd you forever, and it did a lot of damage. I'm not sure what the Backstabber mod was, but I'm sure it was just as painful as the other ones. But also what this does with it, I'm not sure if they realize this, but there's a caged heart in the game that reduces the amount of mana resources, or the resources that you generate, or that is stolen from you. So it reduces it by like 90%. So if you get drained like 10 mana and you have this heart on, it'll block like 9 of that mana from getting drained, and it'll only drain 1. So that was kind of a solution to mana burn. So now that they're they're eliminating the mana burn mod, you kind of just have this caged heart that doesn't really do anything, that they just added to the game. So I guess nobody's going to be using that caged heart now that there's nothing to use it on. They mentioned how awful the mount feels in the game. And they joked about how they watched videos of people like getting caught on nothing and running into barricades and just standing there and like, haha, that's funny and all that stuff. But they didn't actually give any solution to this. They just said, we'll talk about it and we'll see if we can fix that. There'll be fixes to that. I don't know what those fixes are going to be, but it doesn't sound like that great of a solution to just. They didn't really give a solution. They just said that we're gonna fix it. So that's not like. Doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, because they tend to not really fix things the way that I'd assume they would fix it. They talked about the zoom in and zoom out feature, like the perspective zooming out. They didn't answer this question either. But they mentioned how it's creating performance issues. So I guess when you zoom out, it creates like issues like tearing or something. They didn't really go into specifics. But they said they would talk about it after the campfire and probably do like a follow up. But yeah, that's a big problem in a game where everything kind of feels zoomed in, and when you're on a mount, it zooms out a little bit, or when you're fighting a world boss, it zooms out a little bit, and that feels great when it's at that zoom distance. But right now, it's doesn't feel too good. If it was zoomed out a little bit more, you wouldn't get off shot or off screened by like corpse bow, which would also solve that problem of taking damage from charged minions or corpse bow minions who are hitting you from off screen. So it will kind of fix two problems. It'll fix the zoomed in problem, and it will fix the getting off screen attacked. Um, they mentioned resistances again, and they talked about how they're revamping resistances later on. One of their concerns with how resistance works is their fear for resistances where people would probably like stack one resistance and like max it out to the point where if they're fighting a boss, the boss does absolutely no damage to them because they're so high on resistance. And the inverse of that would be like they talked about how if they have no resistance on something and they're just walking around in the world and something hits them for like poison damage, but they have zero poison resistance, they'll just get one shot by anything with poison. So they're trying to work out like a proper balance between like how to manage resistance so it's not too punishing when you have zero and not too overwhelming when you have a lot. A cap to resistance would probably fix that. A lot of games do that, and that would be a good, you know, thing to take away from other games. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Uh, but honestly, if you're not taking any damage from like a boss because you have like, let's say, as much fire resistance as you can get, and a boss only does fire damage, so you can just not take any damage from a boss, that's kind of bad design from the boss. Like, why would you create a character in a game that only does one kind of damage, or even two kinds of damage? Bosses and monsters and elites, like anything that's worth fighting should be doing more than just one type of damage. So I'm not sure why that fear exists in people stacking up one type of resistance. I feel like if people spend all their like stat points or their stat mods on their gear just building up one type of resistance like cold resist, then they kind of like earn that tank ability to go against a cold damage boss and like not get hit by the most cold damaging abilities that it has. That's the whole point of resistances. That's like why you would stack like one resistance in the first place, so you don't get one shotted by like the huge cold attack damage. So that's what they talked about today on the campfire. It sounds pretty good. It sounds like they're actually addressing a lot of the problems. Um, there still needs a lot of work. Again, resistances aren't coming until like season 3, which is like potentially, I guess, the start of season 1. So season 3 is potentially like 200 plus days away, which is like well into next year. Um, so yeah, overall, a lot of good stuff. A lot better than the last campfire where they just apologized for a lot of things. But yeah, hopefully this takes a turn upwards, and Diablo 4 can get back on its feet and be a better game. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, come watch me on Twitch. I appreciate it. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.